Hello everybody, today is our first community request tutorial. So I've had a request come through about making mini-maps or camera views or cameras that could be outputted onto a surface. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at rendering different views to potentially different screens or monitors or something that the player could see. Outputting the view to a render texture, animating a security camera type object, swapping between security camera sources, changing the viewed icons and making a mini-map. This isn't VR specific, but I'm creating it in a VR specific tutorial, but it doesn't matter. This will work no matter what you're doing. So if you want a mini-map, this will cover you. A couple of things to keep in mind with what we're doing today is I've got this scene set up already. For people who are familiar with this already, all I've added to it is an asset from the asset store. This is just a TV looking item that happens to have a screen at the front, which we can do whatever we like with it. You know, we can turn that object off, turn it on, whatever. We're going to put a texture on it later on. So let's start with setting up a camera and then outputting the view to a render texture. So what we are going to do is create a camera, game object, camera, and in my game we're going to imagine that someone might put a camera on the top of this pole. So this isn't for making a minimap, we will look at that later on, but for now we're just imagining there might be a security camera in this world on the top of this telegraph pole. I'm going to point it downwards so it's got a better view of the world, and there you are. You can imagine that camera is looking forward. What we now need to say is I want to take the output from this camera and put it on this TV screen, this computer monitor. And this is the easiest thing in the world, right? So what we need to do is to create a render texture. I'm going to right click anywhere in the asset space and create a render texture. I'm going to call this cam1 output, just so I know that's what camera 1 is outputting to. And then this camera, just going to select it here, I'm going to rename it to security camera 1. Security camera 1. All I'm going to do with it, this SECURITY, I think that's spelled right. All this camera now needs to do to make it go onto that screen is say I want to take the outputs from this camera, feed it into this render texture, and that's just a texture we can then put on this object. Really easy. The way you set it is in this slot here that says render texture. It wants to know which render texture it's going to go to. So drag that render texture we just made, put it in that slot, and now whatever this camera is seeing will get fed into this texture. And then you can put that texture on whatever you like. So let's put it on this TV, shall we? So I'm going to make sure I select the individual screen, drag and drop it on. There you go. Easy as that. Whatever that camera can see is now on this TV. And to prove that this is working in real time, if I were to rotate this camera, let's rotate it this way a little bit so we can now see those over there. You can see that's exactly what it's doing. I can even test this in real time by just changing the Y value, and you can see that that just works. So that's nice. So that's really straightforward. Rendering views, easy. Outputting the view to a render texture, easy. Now let's look at animating it. A static camera is quite good for many games, but let's make it animated. When we animate something, remember you put the animation in the parent, but you animate the child. At the minute, this is an object all by itself, which means we need to create a parent for it. So what we're going to do here is right click on the security camera, create an empty parent, and let's call this, I don't know, security cam parent. Something like that. And now you can see that there is security cam parent and security camera 1. Reason why this is important is I started recording this tutorial a couple of minutes ago and I forgot this step, and it'll become apparent why this is important. Oh, it's really having a Barney with my headset. Oh well. What I'd now like to do is to animate this object, but remember you don't animate the parent, you animate the child. So to make your animations, you go to Window, Animation and Animation, which will open this tab here. I've also got the animator open, which you can do with rendering and animation and animator. Make that. So what we want to do is to create a new animation on the parent, not the child. We will animate the child, but the parent holds the animation. So with the parent selected, we're going to create an animation. I don't currently have a folder for animations, so let's make one. And I'm going to call this Security Cam Anim. So that is now ready to animate, but remember you animate the child, not the parent. So even before I'm recording, I'm going to rotate this camera view 45 degrees on the Y. See, it's 45 degrees, so it's looking to the right at the minute. I'm going to turn animation on, and now I'm going to say 2 seconds later, I want you to be all the way the opposite direction, so minus 45. Now I can just hold down Control, and that will put my 15-degree snaps in, or I could have obviously just typed minus 45. So what I've now got is an animation going from there to there. If I were to play that, it would loop and I'd have a horrible cut as it jumps back to the start of the animation. So what we want is to grab our initial keyframe, copy it, Control C, and at the 4-second mark, which is obviously double the 2-second mark, paste in the original keyframe. So it'll go from its starting position all the way to the other side and then all the way back again, so it can loop smoothly. So let's see what behavior we get. And that looks pretty nice. And while that is animating, let's see what our render texture down here can see. Very, very nice. I think that animation's a bit too fast, so I'm going to grab all those keyframes and I'm going to double its length to about 8 seconds. That's nice. We can see what's going on in our world. Reason why this is important to animate the child, not the parent, I'm going to stop that animation, is I'd now like to make a duplicate of that camera over there. And whenever you're making multiples of something, it pays to turn it into a prefab. So if I grab the Security Cam parent and drag and drop it into the asset space, that will create a prefab. And then you can put that prefab wherever you like. I'm going to put the prefab over here on top of this kind of oil drum, whatever you want to call it. But I'd like to rotate it 180 degrees. So it's facing the opposite direction. So it's now pointing that way, but the animation is pointing that way, ready to ping pong from one side to the other. So let's see what happens if I press play on this animation. It's pointing the correct direction because we rotated its parent. It doesn't know that its rotation has changed. So now we've got two cameras and a computer monitor that doesn't know to change between them. So let's just duplicate that really quickly. I'm now going to have 2 computer monitors and I can create 2 render textures. So if I made another render texture, and this is going to be called Cam2 output, and obviously camera 2, which I've still got called Security Camera 1, let's rename that, that's going to not output to the Cam 1 output, that's going to output to the Cam 2 output. Interesting, I didn't expect them both to change. You've got camera 1. Oh, I think I selected the wrong thing, didn't I? Did I drag 1 in there? No. Cam 2 output for you. Cam 1 output for you. Wonder why they... Oh, okay, because I haven't changed them yet. That'd be why. So, Security Camera 2 No, right. This TV has a screen, and I would like that screen to display this render texture. There we go. That makes sense. That's displaying what that camera can see, and that one's displaying what that camera can see. Now, for many of you, that might be enough for what you want to do within your games. Maybe you want some cameras, and you can see what they are all doing. Don't know why that one's not animating. Why are you not animating, camera? Must have broken it. Maybe I need to re-record the animation. Oh well, I'll leave that as an exercise for yourself. But you can see ultimately it's kind of working. What we're now really interested though is getting it to either toggle between them, or maybe you've just got one output or one camera or something like that. You want to display it on a screen. So we've got some animation going on. Let's swap between security sources. Now, I've not planned this yet, so let's make this up as we go along. What we're now going to have is a single TV, and it will display that camera for a period of time, and then it will display that camera for a period of time. I think all this will take is changing which material, which texture it's displaying. Let's find out if it is that easy, shall we? So all I'm going to say on my CRT monitor, I'm going to make a new script, and this is going to be called cam swap. It will need to know the material, and it will need to know the render texture. So I would like to make a public material, which I'm going to call matte. It needs a public render texture, which I'm going to call cam1. And I also need a render texture called cam2. Because this is basically the same, I'm just going to press Ctrl and D, which will make a duplicate and change the end. So I've now got 3 slots for the material I want to affect and the textures. Let's see how I can use that. The material it will find on the screen. It's a mesh renderer that I want. Right, so it's the mesh renderer that we're changing, and it's just changing this material. So I want the mesh renderer. So it's not a material, it is a mesh renderer. And I'm going to rename this mesh rend, mrend. There we go. And then once we know the mesh renderer, we can say, oi, I want the material to be this or this. Okay, there may be a little bit more complexity here. So because it's displaying a material, which is this material here, maybe we do need materials rather than render textures. So I've just swapped those to be materials rather than render textures. So in our script, we now need to know where the M renderer is, which lives on, in this case, on the screen on object, and which 2 camera outputs, which in this case are the materials. The way I found those materials, by the way, is with the, remember, all this is just literally a rectangle that happens to be slightly curved. All it is. And I double clicked on the material, and it's currently displaying camera 1. I'm going to say be able to change to this as well. So in order to change this, I'm going to say on update, get the component of this object, well, get the component of the, no, I've already got the mrenderer. Mrend. Oh, it's not bad, is it? This autocomplete. Yes. Set the material to equal camera 1. but I also want it to be able to set the M renderer, set the material to camera 2, dependent on whether a period of time has passed or not. So just like our spawn points and our other timers we've done in the past, we're going to create a public floating point value called the time, starts life at 0, and I'm going to create a public floating point value called change time, which sets life at 5. So every 5 seconds we change it. If the time is greater than or equal to the change time, we're going to set it to camera 1, or else we're going to set it to camera 2. And we just need to think about how this is working at the minute. So on the update loop, the time plus equals time.delta time. Remember, that will make the time count up based on what the frame rate is. And at the minute, the way I've got this coded is the time will start life at 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll change 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It'll keep going. So let's just make sure that changes first. It may feel a little bit backwards because I'm kind of jumping to camera 1 and then camera 2, but we'll see what happens. So I'm seeing the second camera, now I'm seeing the first camera. So that seemed to work. I'm going to create another public float. This is inelegant, but I'm going to call this change time 2, which is going to equal to 10. And I'm going to change this. So maybe you've got a bit more complexity than I have. I'm changing this to an else if the time is greater than or equal to change time 2. Basically, we've got a check, haven't we? Start life at 0. Still don't think this is particularly elegant. This will work if you've got lots of inputs. Let's say you've got many cameras you're jumping between, because you can just keep going. I'll let you figure out a tidier solution. It's getting late. But basically what we've got here is... no, let's actually do this properly. If it is greater than 0, camera 1. If it is greater than the change time, it's camera 2. If the time is greater than or equal to the change time 2, all we're going to do is reset what the time is. The time goes back to 0. So stepping through our logic here, every frame increase the timer. If the time is greater than 0, we're displaying camera 1. If the time is greater than change time, which is 5, display camera 2. And then if you go double that, so 10, and reset the timer, which will then immediately jump back through here, and we should have a ping-ponging loop of different cameras. Let's see if that's what happens. We've got our animated camera, which is camera 1. After 5 seconds, I hope to see camera 2. Not a good sign, is it? The time is still increasing, and I didn't expect that. 2, 3, 4, 5. It's because I'm dumb and it's late. So if you actually step through the logic here, if it's greater than 0, it's camera 1. If it's not greater than 0, it'll be camera 2. The problem is it's always going to be greater than 0 in it. So I just need to flip this the other way around. Basically, you do your big numbers first, and then your equal numbers working down. So if the time is greater than 5, it's camera 1. If it is not greater than 5, is it greater than 0? If it is, camera 2. However, if the time has reached higher than our end threshold, the time resets. Let's see if that works. We're seeing our static camera, which is the one that's up there. And now we can see that one. And then hopefully it should loop again when we get back to 10, which we seem to, so that works. So this code is actually quite extendable now. You could add multiple cameras, you could have multiple change times. Still not the tidiest solution in the world, but you could see how that could continue to expand over time. While we're here, let's talk about this error message. There you are, Unity. Currently 3 audio listeners in the scene. Please ensure there's always exactly 1. Each camera has a microphone on it, which thinks it's your player. And it's currently unhappy because you should only have one camera. So if I click on security camera 1, you can see it's got an audio listener. That's your microphone. Don't want it. Remove that component and do the same for camera 2 or any of the cameras you've got. You only ever want one audio listener which should belong to your player, and that's got rid of that error message. So that's an important thing. Now, maybe you don't want security cameras like I've got here. Maybe what you want is a minimap, and we're going to change this now so it works like a minimap instead. So what I'm now going to do is create a camera that's just looking down. If I move this up and I rotate it downwards on the x-axis, 90 degrees, that's pointing straight downwards. But the closer you are, or the further away, you see a slightly different view. And the problem with this is a mini-map, you probably don't want it kind of looking like a regular camera. What you may want instead is that following the player around, so it'll always kind of follow the player like that. Or maybe what you instead want is a clearer view. So rather than having it display the projection mode of perspective, which gives you this triangular vanishing point like that, orthographic may be more appropriate. Now you'll see it turns into a big square rectangle where there is no vanishing point. The height no longer matters. And if you want it to see a wider field of view, you change the size value instead, and that just has the effect of moving out, but it just sees more of your map. So I'm going to take this camera, I'm going to rename it Minimap Camera. Minimap Camera. And just like before, this will have a render texture. So let's create a new render texture. And this is going to call Minimap. And again, you could imagine this being displayed on a TV, or you could imagine it being displayed on a UI element. We're going to put it on a UI element, but you could imagine it on here if you wanted. So I'm going to create a XR canvas. If you're not doing VR, you can just choose canvas. But if I chose a UI canvas, it just so happens I'm going to put it over here somewhere. The canvas is still way too big. And I'm going to make a child of this canvas to be a image. This image can also have a render texture on it. So you could imagine this on the player's wrist, or you could imagine this on an object that the player is holding, or you could imagine it wherever you wanted. So that's going to have the source image of that render texture. Don't think it likes it as an image. Do panels like it? Looks like it's got to be on a material. I think it's because there's nothing like it. Right, let's just make sure I'm not missing a step. This camera should output to that render texture. Maybe I was just missing that step. And then I can put that render texture not on the source image or the material. Okay. Maybe it doesn't like canvases. Scrap the canvas. We're just putting it on a plane. 3D object. Plane. Remember, that just means a flat object. And the minimap is going on the plane. Exciting times. There you go. Minimap. Obviously the problem with the minimap though is it's rendering everything perfectly, just like a camera. And maybe that's the behavior you want. Maybe that's what you want to be able to see on your minimap. But while I'm here, I'm just going to add an outline to it. Did that do anything nice with this purely UI thing? Which would be a UI thing. Anywho, so that's what the camera can currently see, and you could imagine that on the player's wrist or wherever it is. That's what it can see. Remember, depending on the resolution of the texture, so 256 by 256, if you wanted that to be much higher resolution, you bump it up. Remember, powers of 2 is what you want. So double of 256 is 512, and then 512, and you'll see the resolution should increase on here if the picture is big enough to justify that increased resolution. But what I now wanted to show you is how you can change the viewed icon via layers. So currently, if I move my minimap cam, can't see my zombie at the moment because it's just in the corner of the view. So let's move the minimap camera so it can now see our zombie. Problem is, yes, it can see the zombie, but I kind of want this. Let's just orientate this a little bit better. I kind of want my zombie to look like icons in my minimap. I want icons rather than just renderings. And this is really easy to do. If you've got any object that you would like to have an icon to it, let's find a circle. It just so happens I've got a circle sprite in here, but it's a circle. I'm going to drag that as a child on, and literally all this is just, if I zoom out, you see it's just a circle. That's all it is. It's just a sprite render with a circle on it. This circle here is currently a child of the zombie, but it's obviously in the wrong place. So I'm going to set its position to 0 and 0. And I'm going to rotate it so it's under his feet and a little bit up. I'm going to shrink it down. And I'm going to change its colour to red. Now that looks horrible. You wouldn't want that in your game. You don't want the camera to view that. So in the game view, you don't really want to be able to see that horrible red circle under his feet. But we do want that to appear on the minimap. I want the red circle, but I don't want the zombie. This is where layers come in. We can use layers to say which camera should draw which layer. So this circle is going to belong to a layer called minimap. I've already prepared one, but you just add a layer and create something called minimap. I've got a minimap and a terrain layer at the minute. So this circle is going to belong to the minimap layer. The terrain and anything I want to also be drawn is going to belong to the terrain layer. Same for over here and anything else I want to be visible. What I can now tell, not to the render texture, not to there, but to the camera that's drawing it, is which layers should we cull? Which ones should we draw? Which ones shouldn't we draw? And I don't want to draw everything. I want to draw nothing, so that now goes blank, apart from the minimap layer, we can see the dot where our enemy is, and the terrain layer, I can now see my map. But I can't see my zombie because my zombie's on the default layer. So now I've got a circle where the enemy is. If I had lots of zombies, on my minimap, I can see lots of dots where they are. And that's all because I've got one layer that the camera can see and one layer that the character, the player, can see is getting drawn to their camera instead. So a couple of different ways of doing some interesting features there. While we're here though, if you stuck through this far, I may as well do a little bit further. How long have I been going? 30 minutes. Let's just look at this minimap and how this could be made a little bit more attractive. Why not? I'm going to create an empty parent to this object and I'm going to call this minimap. And all I'm going to do on the minimap is also create another plane, 3D object plane, why not? I'm going to rotate that so it matches. Obviously it will fight, that's called Z fighting or Z fighting. And I'm just going to move that back so you don't have any Z fighting anymore. And all that does is it's giving it a border, hasn't it? I've got material for... I've got one here that's silver or yellow. I could make a new material that is black. Give it black material. If I actually dragged and dropped that onto there, kind of looks nice, doesn't it? Remember that if you look at this from the other side, the illusion is broken because it only draws the one side we want to see, but it gives the illusion of depth. Or that could be a texture on a 3D object. If you've got a Pip-Boy on the player's wrist, that would work really nicely. If you've got a movement scanner from kind of the Alien franchise, that would work really nicely using this technique as well. So just be aware that that is a nice way of doing that. If you wanted to detect movement, you could imagine writing a script where this circle only appears if the enemy is moving at a certain speed or above. Or you could say this animates, kind of pulsates, and just has that as an animation, which would look quite nice, just by changing the scale. You know, you could have it so it gets bigger based on how aggressive it is, or smaller based on whether it's being really quiet and sneaky. World's your oyster. And you can see that that minimap would work really, really nicely wherever it is you want it to be. If you are doing 3D rather than VR, that's where it would need to go on a UI element. So I want to figure out why I couldn't get it displaying on a UI element. I'm just going to make a canvas really quickly. Sure, it was an image this was supposed to be on. If you've got this file, guys, you can obviously finish up there. Just trying to figure out why this is not displaying my render texture. In my materials, I've got my camera outputs. Does it accept these? Okay, yeah. It just needed the material rather than the texture. Yeah, so it just needed the material dragging in rather than the texture itself. There you go. Ooh, why is it black? That's the question. I am confused by this. All I'm going to try one last time is just literally dragging the texture as a child of the canvas. I've done this a million times, I don't know why this is hard. Raw image, that's the thing. Raw image, that's what I wanted. And you drag that as a texture. That's why I couldn't figure that out. So raw image rather than an image. There you go, I solved the problem. that's everything for me, guys. If you have got any more requests of things you'd like to learn or know how to do, send them me on Teams and I'll do my best. Thank you all.